So what I might do is just kick off anyway, and if someone comes, I'll just give my quick apologies as we go through. So I know I've got some of you know me quite well anyway. I'm Paul, obviously enough. Thanks for finding some time to have a little bit of a chat. The purpose of it was to just briefly go over summer camps. I knew that some people might have some questions, so feel free at any stage to just interject. It's not meant to be a formal presentation by any means, but I just know that no one has any time, sometimes including me. So it's always just nice to get some questions answered. And again, most of it could be fairly obvious, so my apologies in advance. It might be obvious to some of the parents who have had kids in the program or when I say, well, we've only been going a couple of years, so they can't have had parents in the program for too long, but you get the idea. Anyway, summer. The preamble is that our year breaks into either 2 parts or 4 parts, depending on how you see it. So for me, there's a real passage between, say, September the 3rd and the end of May. Now, a lot of what happens in that time, obviously a lot of, I wouldn't say academic stress, but a lot of academic work for the kids during that period of time, and a little bit of a pressure of time to get them in, get something useful done and get them back out. So summer provides us with more minutes. So when you're training kids, or when you're training adults as well, actually, volume. So the overall load of a player. So if you ever discuss it with coaches in any sport, the overall training load is made up of 2 things: how hard and how many minutes. So the nice part about summer is we get more minutes, which is something that's a rare luxury at other times of year. So more minutes for the kids and more repetitions. So to finish that slightly dull repetitions, you're always looking at trying to make sure that they're guided repetitions, so that first of all, that the kids hit a lot of balls, that the kids have guidance as to where they're hitting the ball and why they're hitting the ball and how they're hitting the ball. And then 3, some aspect of reflection upon that. So the nature of the summer camp should be that by the end of either a day or a week, or certainly the 13 weeks, that the kids have worked on their own particular agendas. The other part of, just to finalize that chat, summer is a little bit different in as much as each of the seasons we break into 13 weeks in Squash Tigers. So again, briefly, if there are 5 things that we train, so technique, tactics, physical fitness, and the psychological ideas, concentration, goal setting, pre-rally rituals. So there are 4 very distinct areas. Then that 5th area, that's very much very much life skills. So everything from sportsmanship through to how to tie your shoelaces for some of our kids that may not be that wonderful at that all the time. Now, the reason I bring that up is because each different season has a slightly different emphasis, and summer's no different. So the easy way to explain it to people is during the winter. So during the big competitive times of year, we do, technique is always important, but we do less technical work. For instance, the week before a national championship, because we're very interested in kids having a good idea of where they're hitting the ball rather than how they're hitting the ball. And then certainly spring and summer, that little bit more technical work. So for most of us, a little bit further away from the pressure of competition. There's always some pressure of competition, but away from the really pointy end of things. So an opportunity both to get a little bit of technique ironed out, maybe a little bit more, and certainly an opportunity in many cases to get the children that little bit more squash specifically fit. And that doesn't mean we don't always, again, do fitness, because certainly we do all year round. But the last thing we need is an exhausted little person, the week before they're off to play a gold tournament or a JCT, God forbid. So you get the general idea of that summer starts spring, and then of course summer starts to emphasize those 2 factors a little bit more than the others. But and please just interject, and if you're about to go to sleep, please clap or something. I do apologize. Where are we? We are in the Valley of. All right, this year we've changed a little bit from last year. So I remember talking with people like David, just saying that things were in a good way, just a little different, so nothing terrible. Obviously the club's only 2 years old. So our summer programming this year, we've kicked off from the start of June. So our schedule changes from where we are at the moment. So we have that pretty much the same schedule from September 1 through till the end of May, and that changes up from June 1. We're conscious some of the kids are still at school for at least the first stretch of June, so there's still an opportunity. The camp starts a little later and end a little later, just to incorporate that reality. But certainly those first couple of weeks of June, again, at the times it starts to move, and then it kicks into, if you like, full summer camp after that. We're always, when we say the four, we're always very open to players of all standards, and that's meant to be one of the real strengths of the camp. So the top end of our programming will be for, I always say in a nice way, the really developed guys. So some of the top ranked players in the country. For our second year of operations, we, from memory, qualified two, might have been 23. We'll say 22 kids into the Gold Nationals. So that's 22 of the kids who are members of the club, members of the program, who were then in the top 32 of their age groups and eligible to play in the Gold Nationals. So at the top end is that, and at the bottom end, as you'd all be aware, we have a raft of either less experienced players or downright just little people. So again, we try and cater for them all. We have not a bundle of coaches, but like this evening, for instance, Jamie, myself, Claire, you can expect to see some more faces on board as well during the summer. So it'll be nice and busy. What to expect? I think we already got into that. There are aspects of all of those 5 trainables. So going through it again, that whole notion of tactics, technique, some aspects of physical fitness, certainly my own academic backgrounds in sports psychology. So there's always big, hopefully accessible, but big bits and pieces of stressing different aspects of sports psychology, all under that underpinning 5th trainable. So the whole life skills idea. So high standards of courtesy to, players to each other, players to coaches, and of course an emphasis on those intangibles. So trying to make sure the children have some sense of awareness of warming up, cooling down, eating, drinking, tying shoelaces, calling the ball when it's down. There's all those intangibles that we like to class in that number 5 category. AM session 9:30 through to 12. And that's a long time. So the nice part about that is that there are a lot of balls struck. We're very conscious of not only wishing to make sure the kids become better players, but that it's enjoyable. I always remind people that summer means different things for different kids. So don't be particularly surprised if you're wondering to find, I don't know, us playing a very silly game of volleyball on one of the glass courts with a blow-up plastic ball for a little while. Now, I'm not going to do that for 2.5 hours with the kids, but it is a summer camp. So even some of the number 1s in the country, even some of the under 17 boys will participate in just some fun stuff as well. Anyway, morning sessions, afternoon sessions, and Monday to Friday, all weeks of summer, except the July the 4th, which I suspect is pretty much what you accepted as well. We'll still go there Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week in July. We just don't have the Thursday, Friday that week, the 4th and the 5th. And again, please, as I said at the start, it's not meant to be a big diatribe. So if anyone's got something to ask, maybe type it in the chat or just interrupt me. It's not brain surgery, guys. Always happy to hear from you. So please feel free. Jotting through what's summer performance. So in terms of the performance training, we are very similarly, very much the same anyway as last year. So small group training for what we'd lovingly call our most ambitious juniors. Just because you're good doesn't mean you're serious. And candidly, just because you're serious doesn't mean you're good. So we have, and we're open for every standard of player and every standard of ambition. The role of coaches is to help the players achieve their goals. It's not to achieve my goals. I mean, I already had a playing career. It wasn't just yesterday, but I've already done that. So I'm always keen on making sure that it's very much directed by families and the players. So by that, what I mean is there will be kids playing goals who are putting in very, very hard work and belong in the performance program. There might be other of our super gifted kids that, maybe even JCT level, and they're just not super highly motivated, and that's fine as well. So as I said, the performance program very much around those most ambitious ones, not necessarily only just the best ones at the moment. When we say includes fitness, mental, tactical, and advanced drills, for those of you who have kids that are already in the performance program, it's a little bit different. So when I say a little bit different, the concept of periodization is an important one to us. So the notion that you do not do the same work in summer, so July, August, that training shouldn't look the same then as it would look in, for example, December before the US Junior Open. And that's probably fairly obvious to you, but traditionally squash, hasn't done a great job of that. So an awful lot more, as I said, emphasis on where are we putting our feet? How fit are we? How many repetitions can we gain? Someone gives us an opportunity to drill down on some of that minutia, and the performance program even more so than normal camp. I say in a very nice way, it's also a little bit of my drill sergeant time. So as much as it's still a kids program and we hope it's always fun and enjoyable, very much the performance program is a little bit of my drill sergeant hat on, to make sure the kids are really screwed down to a task. Again, not that the rest of it's lazy, but it's particularly that little bit more intense. Schedule. Now, what will normally happen, that runs our performance runs from 10:45 through to 12. If your child is one of the kids in that, generally what I'd advise is they arrive closer to 10:30 and get their warm-up done beforehand. Should you be a little bit late, that's fine. It's summer training. I'm not going to be upset with anybody that arrives late for anything involving our summer. But just if you're asking for a guide, normally it takes a solid 8-minute warm-up beforehand, and we would prefer to have the kids bouncy and boppy and ready to go at 10:45 for that. But again, just hold that in your mind. It's Monday through Thursday. Obviously, there are some gold summer tournaments that many of you will be participating in. And don't press me now on what we're attending. I know I'm going to at least UVA, but certainly you'll get some sort of emails confirming what other plans we might have at different times. Certainly Zoom's always an option for all of those, but I believe I'm going to UVA at the moment. I just don't have that calendar in front of me at this moment. Designed as a bolt-on. Now, what I mean by bolt-on, it's meant to be an add-on. So especially during summer, unless there's some spectacularly unusual reason for it, it's not a standalone. 75 minutes is a bit of work, but generally in summer, it's not that much work, and it's designed to be part of a normal day, so to speak. So if you think of the elite guys, and that's where we are in performance, they'll probably rock it in 10:30, train from, as I said, 10:45 to 12. That will be hard. Then that hour for lunch, and then probably do an afternoon camp. So if you're looking for a recommendation for the advanced guys, that would be it. Doesn't mean they have to. Got time for everybody, but that is really what it's meant to. If your child's a little bit short of time, they are better off to do the morning camp. If they're only going to do one thing in the morning, do the morning camp rather than just try and enter just a performance. That doesn't make a great deal of sense. Again, I feel like I'm talking at people. I remember back in the pandemic with all those Zoom chats, and you're kind of talking into space and wondering how much sense you made. I'm getting those throwback feelings. So please tell me if I need to clarify anything a little more. Bouncing along, that is just a really ugly schedule, but it's the best I can do. I make a really good squash coach, but I make a fairly average graphic designer. There is one error on the page, and hey, I am but human. There will be a rehearsal tournament on the second Saturday, so I think it's June 6th. So that will take the place of programming on June 6th. So there's actually a newer one of these on the website. It's just me being silly and forgot to include it in this particular one. But everything else on this is accurate. The camp runs, as I said, in that early patch through June 1. So with my little cursor thing there, in that early patch through June 1 for those couple of weeks through to June. What we have is a compromise through to June 14. What we have is a little bit of a compromised schedule because we're aware that some of the kids break up from school at different times and might have some different needs. So the last thing we want to do is cut some of our community out of our training, because that's not how we roll. So 2 to 4, then a performance, and then that 5 to 7. And it will look exactly as you think it would look. That's a nice bouncy boppy time. And that runs, as I said, from June 1 through to June 14. I suspect UVA is June 14, 15, 16 off the top of my head. And then we kick off on June 17 with what I'd call our normal schedule. So that morning camp, 9:30 to 12. As I said, that performance is conducted concurrently. What I do is generally steal some of the more experienced players, and we sort of cohabit half of the club and the fitness world. And while the little ones tend to be involved, down the other end of the facility or up the glass court end of the facility at that time. And then afternoon camp, 1 till 3:30. When I say to look a bit like last year, I think I've spoken to most of you individually and pointed out, I've been coaching for a very long time, and really enjoyed coaching for a very long time. That's not meant as a bad thing, but every year you hope you get a little bit better. So I always hate saying it will look a lot like last year because, professionally speaking, I reflect, we add things, we subtract things, and hopefully it'll be even better. But generally the feel of the Squash Tigers program, the feel of what it represents, so that nice speed, agility beginning in terms of their warm-ups and their speed, agility, physical work at the beginning, and then the feel of those sorts, and then the drills, the sort. So in other words, the determined placings in the squad, and then the type of drills will be similar. Maybe the exact details of them will be a little bit different. Some of the off-court fitness work, we've gone through it to make it a little bit more engaging. So still hard work, but hopefully even a little bit more fun in terms of our, we do little body weight circuits and speed agility work. And I'm sure you'd be aware from, the children last year, for those of you who had kids here, it's hard, but it's fun. I mean, again, it is summer, so it is meant to be fun as well, but they'll get a lot of work done. Anyway, so that's from our 1:30 to 3:30, which is the bouncy boppy time of day. The FAQs down below, I think I've already mentioned it. Performance training, if you're not sure if your little boy or your little girl should be in performance, just drop me an email or have a chat with me. I mean, it's probably readily apparent to most people, but always happy for the chat. Private lessons, I should say private lessons and individual conditioning sessions are available in addition to what we are doing. When? So before camp, after camp, during that lunch hour, all those sorts of things are open. It's myself, Colin, Jamie, Claire, and I mean, potentially some other coaches involved, but again, it's April, so I don't want to get ahead of myself there. Camp opens 30 minutes before the first training session, close 30 minutes post. We will never leave your children on the streets, so don't misunderstand me. But that's, as a general guide, certainly that will be what is happening. Lunch is not provided for campers, but they are very welcome to eat it here. So by that, we put aside little areas of the club, whereby they can sit down and have lunch in a nice civilized environment. So they're monitored closely when they're in the club. And candidly, Plainsborough is one of the nicest, comfiest, safest, whatever places to monitor and get lunch and return. It's not an uncommon thing to the children to enjoy lunch as much as any other part of the camp. So that's part of the whole environment, I suppose. At the moment, what we have are camp signups, and what we did was we rolled this out to essentially members first. So the intention was to make sure that everybody who might want to jump in for that full day or morning, afternoon, whatever, for the season had an opportunity. I think at the start of next month, we then open up the weeklies. It's only April, so I mean, we're ahead of the curve. We just wanted to make sure that people who are trying to stack their summer experience in and who knew exactly what they wanted to do, had the opportunity to jump in there in advance. Again, just give me a thumbs up or drop something in the chat if I have messed something up or if I can clarify something for you. Where are we? Oops, I jumped ahead of myself, aren't I? Full summer options open for registration now. That's fine. Now, and in no way am I complaining, so bear with me for a second, but if you are not getting a whole series of emails from me, once a week, probably once every 10 days at the most, could you just double check what you're seeing on, what your email address is in your court reserve profile? Because there's nothing worse than for you not to be aware of the offerings of the club, and nothing more frustrating for me than sending emails into nothingness. So again, most of this you will get fairly frequently, I hope anyway. Anyway, full summer options open for registration now. Weekly open from May 1. Limited based on full summer registrations. Again, no pressure on anybody to be full summer, but the club is primarily, I mean, even in terms of my own motivation, I'm primarily there to make sure that the people who are clearly Squash Tiger members and who are here for the whole year are looked after. So the last thing I would like is a whole series of guests, and then that compromise the experience of the kids that we coach year round to events. Doesn't mean I'm not happy for guests. I am happy for guests. I'm happy to be nice to anybody. But it's kind of like prioritizing your family before you prioritize your guests. So that's the type of feeling that we have. That's the reason for the staggered start. So that's weekly options, then daily options will open after that. It wouldn't surprise me in terms of the daily options that we don't actually get to the daily option stage. But again, I'm not really sure that anyone on this call really gives a darn one way or another about that. But certainly, as I said, full summer now, weeklies from May 1, and then the daily options will wander open as it happens. But as I said, I'm not sure that many of you are in that particular category, but just for your information. There we go. So there's that and that. Again, any questions, please just drop me a quick line in the chat. Other happenings. So again, that's sort of the mini conclusion of the camp things. So again, we can get some questions at the end of this. Happenings. Oh, my second typo. Remember, I had one typo on the other page. It's Insta at Squash Tigers Philadelphia. I think that should be. So it's my other typo. So forgive me for that. We have a new location coming in summer of 2024. So you can follow that there. What are my notes? Located in the upcoming Philadelphia suburb of Exton. It sounds like we want you to move there. Exton is actually a very nice place. It reminds you very much of Plainsboro. Nice little part of Philly. For those of you who aren't really up in your Philadelphian geography, it is what an Australian would say just down the road from the Episcopal Academy. So a nice part of the world. What does it have to do with our Plainsboro operations? Probably not terribly much. Certainly only good things anyway. Access to more high-class coaches. So for those of you who are just a little bit more interested in the broader happenings in the squash world, we have a gentleman called Lawrence Elriani. So Coach Lawrence is one of the former big dogs at the Heights Casino, which is one of the big New York programs for many, many years. His son Jack's the national under-17 champion. He's our head pro, and he's good value. I mean, for those of you who don't know him, solid guy, very good coach. Can only be happy about that. And the next couple of months, it doesn't open for several months, and the next passage of time, you'll hear other announcements about coaches. That will help us with things like a capacity to cover tournaments. So I think for those of you who are in JCTs and Golds, you'd be aware that that's a very labor-intensive process. So having other expert coaches around will be happy. With the last point, access to a larger pool of players to train with. Your Squash Tigers membership will allow you, upon appropriately registering that sort of stuff, will allow you to use either facility. Now, whether or not you actually feel like making the hour trek, nice little club. It'll have 7 glass courts. So obviously here we have our 5 plastic courts and our 2 glass. That will have 7 glass also. Obviously an hour away and in Philly, so a whole different cast of players. So that might be of interest to some people to make the occasional trip through. Certainly there's no compulsion for people to, and they could very happily, your children could happily come from the age of 8 through the age of 18 and never make a step in the other location. Certainly some of those coaches at different times will make appearances in Plainsboro. I mean, that's just what it is, but so you'll certainly gain some benefit from exposure to some more expert coaches. But as I said, there's no compulsion to make it down to Philly. Apart from the fact that it is a very, very attractive club. Again, it will be opening in summer, but when you eventually get a look at it, you will be impressed. Then again, when I look out my office window at the blue court there, it won't look any better than this one, but it'll look just as good. It's a very nice facility. So that's that. And I've managed to sneak in roughly on time as well. So this is the time we allocated for questions if anybody has one. So if you either want to unmute yourself or if you want to put something in the chat, very happy to address anyone's thoughts or ideas. It's always a little bit daunting on a call like this to say, hey, so if you don't feel like chatting now, feel free to grab me when you're next in the club. There's no great embargo that I won't talk to you about from there. And the other nice part is, of course, that it's still just April the 16th, I think. So obviously a lot of time between now and the start of camps on the 1st of June. My chat's empty. Does anyone want to unmute themselves? Has anyone got a question they might like to come up with, either in summer camps or Philly or?
I do have a question.
Super.
Regarding the fall summer option, should we let you know ahead of time which day the player will go, or we can just drop them any day?
It will allow, right, the system will certainly, you are certainly welcome to come on any day, and you'll get further confirmation as we get closer, just to be able to make your little reservation in court reserve. But suffice to say, don't stress, you'll just be able to wander in, your place is reserved. So your kids will never be turned away, if that makes any sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone ever noticed on Zoom? I mean, I always think there's something wrong with my camera, because I surely can't have this many wrinkles. I sort of look at my Zoom camera and I go, this is not good. But that may be just reflecting reality. This will be your last call for questions, everybody. Again, thank you very, very much for logging in this evening. Have a little bit of a think about it. If there's anything that occurs to you, drop me an email, or again, talk to me when you're in the club. You'll be very, very welcome to do so. Summer is normally the time when kids, frequently, not always, but frequently the time when players jump levels. So it's a fairly common story. I mean, I know I have Aniket on the call. Common story for Path, back when Path was candidly a tubby little 10-year-old. A solid summer of training and went from nowhere much to getting pretty good. Nowadays, of course, top 4 in the country is kind of scary. So a lot of guys have gone from just starting out and putting in a nice hard summer and have really moved their performances. So again, it's one of those things that are demonstrably enjoyable, and have had a pretty strong record of setting kids up to have a lot of success during the season. So I'm a big fan of certainly from a coaching perspective, we get a lot of minutes with the kids, and from an outcomes perspective, very fond of the effect that then has when we kick back into September with if you like, with the real competition in force. So we get an opportunity to put in almost another full season of work into our players, whereas many other players kind of half hang up their racket during the summer months. So what I always like to say to your kids, if they're already ahead of other people, a good solid summer and they're further ahead. And if they're behind someone, well, that's a darn good chance for them to catch up, while others are maybe not as engaged as they are. Anyway, enough of my ruminations. Last chance if someone has a question.
Yeah, Paul, would you be sharing this recording later? Would you be sharing this recording later? The
yes.
Recording of this.
Oh, it's a really good question. Thank you. Should have said that.
Yeah.
Yep, we'll pop it up and send the link out.
All right.
No, well done. I should have said that.
Right. Thank you, Paul.
No, look, you're very welcome, and thank you for dialing in. And on that note, I will, unless someone interrupts me almost immediately, I will say thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the club soon. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Big summer ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.